All right, applying the zero product property. We have two different things that we're going to be doing with these problems. The first thing is we're going to find all roots, and then the second part is that we're going to write the equation in standard form. Now, starting off with finding all roots. When you are finding roots, I want to make sure that we are aware. Roots, oops, if I can spell it correctly, roots are also sometimes called zeros, are also sometimes called solutions, and even in some cases are called x-intercepts. I want to introduce you to all four of those terms because they're all asking you to do the same thing. Whether it says find the roots, find the zeros, find the solutions, find the x-intercepts, it's asking you to do the same thing. So we're going to start off with that. So if I look at this, I have two parts to my equation. I have this part right here that's out front, and then I have this part out here that's inside. Now when I'm talking about the parts of the equation, I'm talking about the parts where there is a letter. If you notice in number 2, yes, there's something out front, but there's no letter there. If there's no letter there, there's no answer there. So I would only talk about those two parts in that one. Again, the reason being over here there's a letter, so I do need to account for it. When there's not a letter, I do not. Okay? So, finding all the roots, it's super easy. I have two parts. I take each part individually, so this first part is just x, and I set it equal to 0. If I need to, I solve it from there. But that one x is already by itself. Then I take this part, the x plus 5, set it equal to 0. This one does have a little bit of solving. I'm going to subtract 5 from both sides, and I get x equals -5. So I have two answers for my problem. Easy enough. Now, if you're typing the answers into a computer, all I want you to do, don't type the x equals. All I want you to do is type in 0, -5. Or if you put it in the other order, you can type -5, 0. Either way, don't worry about any spaces or anything. Just give me the two numbers. So number, number. That's it for finding all the roots. That's all I need to do. What would that look like over here if I found the roots? Again, I don't need to worry about the 3 for this part. I just need to take this set of parentheses. Oops, not a parentheses. Don't need a parentheses anymore because I'm separating it out. Let's get rid of that little guy. So 4x plus 3, and what do? I set it equal to 0. This one has a little bit of solving. I'm going to subtract 3. That gives me 4x equals -3. Divide by 4, and x equals -3/4. Please leave it as a fraction. Do not go to decimal form. Then this guy, I would take x plus 7, set it equal to 0, do my solving by subtracting 7, and I get x equals -7. Again, typing this onto Edge Elastic, you would type in -3/4, -7, or you could type in -7, -3/4. Again, do not use decimals, please. Okay, so that's it for finding the roots. That should be a piece of cake. I can go through and I can do these all really, really fast. So this one has two parts. I'm going to take this part, n plus 3, set it equal to 0, do my solving by subtracting 3. I get n equals -3. Then this guy, 4n minus 1, set it equal to 0, plus 1 plus 1, 4n equals 1, divide by 4, and n equals 1/4. Again, don't go to decimal, leave it as a fraction. We will learn over the next several days why this is an important process, okay? What the zero product property says is you want either one of these need to be 0 or both of them need to be 0 in order for their multiplication product to equal 0 as well. And we'll talk more about that in the next several days. But right now I just want you to be able to find the zeros. So I have a 5 out front. Do I set that equal to 0? No. There's no letter with it. There's no answer with it. So I'm just going to set these two, n plus 1 equal to 0, and n plus 3 equal to 0. So here I'm going to subtract 1. That gives me n equals -1. And over here I'm going to subtract 3. And yes, I do want to see all this work. N equals -3. Okay? And the last one. Ready? All right. Is there an answer out front? Yes or no? Yes. Why is there an answer out front? Because there's a letter there. So 8n, I do have to set equal to 0. So how would I solve that? I would divide by 8. And what is 0 divided by 8? Well, 0 divided by anything is 0. My other answer I will get from here. 4n plus 3, set it equal to 0. I'm going to subtract my 3. So 4n equals -3. Divide by 4, n equals -3/4. Again, leave it as a fraction. Now, hopefully you should notice some problems as you're going through these, or notice some patterns as you're going through these, of what happens when there's a letter in front, a coefficient to your variable, versus when there's not. If you notice when there's not a coefficient, I tend to get a nice answer. When there is a coefficient, that tends to be when I have a fraction. Okay, so what I just did is I just found all the roots for these problems. Now I need to move on to the second part. The second part says what? It says write the equation in standard form. Now we've talked about standard form before. That's where the highest exponent comes first. Well, for most of these we're getting in specifically to quadratic, so I want to introduce standard form. Standard form is ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. You may have seen that before, but basically you have your x squared term first, and then your x term, and then something without an x, and your equals 0 technically could be on the right side, or it could be on the left. It doesn't matter as long as all those guys are the same. So how would I get each of these to look like that? Well, if you notice, standard form doesn't have any parentheses. So the way I'm going to start off is I got to get rid of those parentheses. So if I start off with x times x plus 5 equals 0, how do I get rid of those parentheses? I just distribute. X times x is x squared. X times 5 is 5x. There is no c term, if you will. There's an a would be 1, b would be 5. There is no other term, so I just put equals 0. Whoop. And there's my answer. Not too bad. You should be able to type that into the computer as well. All right, what about here? I have 3, and then I have 4x plus 3, and I have x plus 7. How do I do this when I have a 3 outside? What do I do? Well, my suggestion, oops, I need my equals 0, is to take these two things first and get my answer to that, then distribute the 3 through. So this right here is going to be a 2 by 2 multiplication. Yeah? I made a tiny box there. Let's see if I can write small enough to fit it. 4x and 3, x and 7. What is 4x times x? 4x squared. 4x times 7 would be 28x. 3 times x is 3x, and 3 times 7 is 21. So when I write that all out, I have 4x squared, 28, 29, 30, 31x, plus 21. I still have an equals 0. Now's where I want to deal with that 3. So technically all of that still needs to be multiplied by 3. So let's just distribute that 3 and then we're done. 3 times 4x squared would be 12x squared. 3 times 31x, let's see, 3 times 31, you can use your calculator if you want to. I'm just too lazy to get it out. That would be 93x. And then 3 times 21 would be 363. and don't forget that equals 0 there. Okay? For today's assignment, if you're plugging it into the computer, let's try and leave the equals 0 on the far right side of the problem. Okay? And that's it. So let's go on to number 3. Number 3, there is no number out front to distribute, so I just need to do my box. So I'm going to write my 2 by 2 box. I have n and 3 and 4n minus 1. So n times n is 4n squared. N times negative 1 is negative n. 3 times 4n is 12n. And 3 times negative 1 is negative 3. So I think I have 4n squared plus 11n minus 3. And don't forget the equals 0. Hopefully this is a piece of cake for you. Okay? All right, number 4 is just like the one above it, where it has that number out in front. So I'm going to do the box for those two, and then I'll distribute the number. So my box for those two, let's see, I have n plus 1, and I have n plus 3. N times n is n squared. N times 3 is 3n. 1 times n is n, and 1 times 3 is 3. That gives me n squared plus 4n plus 3 equals 0. And now I'm going to take that 5, and I'm going to multiply that 5 through. So 5 times n squared is 5n squared. 5 times 4n is 20n. And 5 times 3 is 15. Don't forget your equals 0. And that's your answer. Okay? All right, last problem, number 5. I don't need to do a box because we just have distributive property. 8 times 4 would be 32, and n times n would be n squared. And 8 times 3 would be 24, and I have an n with that term, and then I just have equals 0. So that's my answer for number 5. That one's a little bit easier because I don't have to draw a box. Okay? All right, happy studying.